May 23, 1945, a nondescript drafty interrogation room at 31A Uelzener Strasse in Lüneburg, Germany. Inside, British soldiers are conducting a strip search on a small, nervous man. He looks like thousands of other displaced people drifting through the ruins of the shattered Third Reich. He carries forged papers and a passport that is suspiciously clean, fresh from some bureaucratic press. He looks frail, ordinary, almost pathetic. But during the medical exam, everything changes in a fraction of a second. As the doctor attempts to look inside his mouth, the man violently jerks his head back and bites down on a hidden object. Within 15 minutes, Heinrich Himmler is dead. The architect of the Holocaust, the man who oversaw the industrial slaughter of millions, lies flat on a cold concrete floor. A tiny glass vial of potassium cyanide, hidden between his teeth for days, has done its work. There would be no high-profile trial for Himmler. There would be no extensive cross-examination, no public testimony, and no direct justice for the 6 million Jews systematically wiped from the face of Europe under his command. Instead, the man who signed mass deportation orders from a plush office in Berlin took his secrets into the dirt, his body hastily buried by British soldiers in an unmarked grave somewhere on the Lüneburger Heath. He left behind a silence that still echoes through modern history. To truly understand the weight of what happened in that quiet room, you have to look at the sheer scale of the terror this man set in motion. As Reichsführer of the SS, Himmler was not just a politician. He was the CEO of a sprawling empire of death. He controlled the SS, the Gestapo, and the entire concentration camp network. He turned mass murder into a highly efficient bureaucratic routine. Yet, when the day of reckoning arrived for the Nazi high command at Nuremberg in 1946, Himmler's chair was empty. Hermann Göring, Joachim von Ribbentrop, and Ernst Kaltenbrunner were forced to sit in the dock, face the survivors, look at the graphic film evidence of their crimes, and answer for what they had done. Himmler answered to no one. By biting down on that capsule, he locked the doors to the archive of his mind before anyone could ask a single question. The irony of Himmler's suicide is that just weeks earlier, he had no intention of dying. In fact, he genuinely believed he had a bright political future ahead of him. By April 1945, the Red Army was systematically flattening Berlin, block by block. The Third Reich was disintegrating into ash, yet inside his mobile headquarters, Himmler was busy concocting what might be the most delusional gamble in military history. Through a Swedish intermediary, Count Folke Bernadotte, he reached out to the Western Allies. His proposal was stunningly arrogant. He offered a partial German surrender on the Western Front. In exchange, he expected personal immunity from prosecution. Himmler was convinced that the alliance between the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union was about to shatter. He believed that Winston Churchill and Dwight Eisenhower would view him as a valuable, stable partner to help them govern occupied Germany and fight off the communist threat from the East. He even wondered aloud to his aides whether he should salute the Western generals with the Nazi salute or a standard military gesture when they met to negotiate. He completely miscalculated. Eisenhower and Churchill rejected the overture instantly, refusing to even entertain a conversation with the head of the SS. To make matters worse for Himmler, news of his secret negotiations leaked and reached Adolf Hitler, who was hiding out in the Führer bunker beneath Berlin. It sparked one of Hitler's final, legendary rages. Furious at the betrayal by der treue Heinrich, loyal Heinrich, Hitler stripped Himmler of all his titles, threw him out of the Nazi Party, and issued an order for his immediate arrest and execution. Overnight, Himmler became a man without a country, without an army, and without a master. He was hunted by the Allies as a prime war criminal and condemned by his own regime as a traitor. On April 30th, Hitler shot himself, destroying the dark political sun around which Himmler's entire adult life had revolved. Himmler did not choose a dramatic final stand. He chose to run. He altered his appearance, shaving off his trademark mustache. He slapped a black patch over his left eye and donned the uniform of a low-ranking sergeant in the Feldgendarmerie, military police. He took the name of a real deceased soldier, Heinrich Himmler. Armed with freshly stamped forged discharge papers, he hit the road. He joined the massive, chaotic human tide flowing through northern Germany, millions of starving refugees, wounded soldiers, and freed prisoners walking the highways. He hoped to blend into the background, slip across the Elbe River, and disappear forever into rural anonymity. The man whose name had terrorized a continent was now just another dirty, hollow-eyed fugitive trudging through the mud. But his meticulous nature proved to be his undoing. On May 22, 1945, a British patrol at a checkpoint near Bremerförde stopped a small group of German soldiers. Among them was the disguised Himmler. When the soldiers handed over their documents, the British intelligence team noticed something strange. Most retreating German soldiers had papers that were torn, blood-stained, or water-damaged. Himmler's papers, however, were pristine. They were neatly stamped, brand new, and perfectly filled out. It was a classic counterintelligence trap. The forgery was simply too perfect. Furthermore, the man holding them didn't act like a battle-hardened sergeant. He was incredibly stiff, and his eyes darted around erratically. The British flagged him for further interrogation. He spent the night in a holding cell, entirely unrecognized. The next day, he was transferred to the 2nd Army Intelligence Headquarters in Lüneburg. As the questions grew more intense, Himmler realized his run was over. He walked up to the camp commander, Captain Tom Sylvester, quietly removed his eye patch, put on his familiar pince-nez glasses, and whispered, "Heinrich Himmler, Reichsführer SS." The British were utterly stunned. They had caught the big fish completely by accident. Colonel Michael Murphy, the intelligence chief, immediately took control. He ordered Himmler stripped naked and searched thoroughly to prevent suicide. They found a small brass cylinder hidden in his clothes containing a glass vial of cyanide. Believing they had neutralized the threat, the guards let their guard down slightly. They didn't realize Himmler had a backup capsule tucked away in his mouth, nestled tightly against his gums. A military doctor, Captain C.J.L. Wells, was brought in to do a standard physical examination. Around 11 p.m., Wells asked Himmler to open his mouth so he could check the teeth. He shone a flashlight inside and saw a dark object. "Open wider," Wells said, leaning in. Himmler knew this was his last exit. He violently twisted his head, bit down hard on the glass capsule, and crunched it between his molars. The room instantly filled with the sharp, overwhelming scent of bitter almonds, the classic signature of cyanide. Wells and the guards reacted immediately. They tackled Himmler to the floor, forced his mouth open, and tried to scrape the poison out. They turned him upside down, plunged his face toward a basin of water, and tried to force emetics down his throat to pump his stomach. For 15 agonizing minutes, British soldiers fought desperately to save the life of the world's most prolific killer. They wanted him alive for a courtroom. They wanted him to speak. But the poison was too fast. At 23:14, the erratic breathing stopped and the room went dead quiet. The historical contrast of that moment is staggering. Himmler's regime routinely executed political prisoners by hanging them from meat hooks with piano wire, filming their slow deaths so senior Nazi officials could watch them later for entertainment. His SS organized massive public executions in camp squares, forcing thousands of starving inmates to watch people swing from gallows just to crush their morale. Yet Himmler himself died completely off camera in a modest, requisitioned house, witnessed by just a doctor and a handful of soldiers. There was no microphone to record his final words, no audience to witness his end, and no grand historical statement. Just a frantic, messy scramble on a concrete floor. Colonel Murphy wanted to ensure that Himmler's death wouldn't offer any lingering comfort to his followers. He ordered the body wrapped tightly in standard army blankets and camouflage netting. A few soldiers loaded the corpse into the back of a truck, drove out deep into the forests of the Lüneburger Heath, and dug a hole. They threw the body in and covered it up. They deliberately chose not to record the coordinates of the grave. To this day, nobody knows exactly where Himmler lies, a deliberate move to ensure his gravesite could never become a shrine for future neo-Nazi movements. More than 80 years have passed since that night in Lüneburg. Over the decades, the geography of Himmler's immense power has undergone a profound inversion. It has transformed from a landscape of terror into a landscape of memory. The site of his old SS and Gestapo headquarters on Prince Albrecht Strasse in Berlin is no longer an office of terror. It is the topography of terror, a sprawling indoor and outdoor museum that draws over 1 million visitors a year from across the globe. Near Munich, the Dachau concentration camp, the very first camp, the blueprint that Himmler personally designed and expanded, is now a permanent memorial site. Every single year, hundreds of thousands of people, including thousands of school children, walk past the iron gates and stand on the concrete foundations where his clerks once typed out execution quotas. Yet, despite the museums and the historical archives, a profound sense of frustration lingers over the story of Himmler's end. 15 minutes. That is what it cost him. 15 minutes of panic and choking on a floor balanced against the scale of 6 million Jewish lives, balanced against the millions of others, Soviet prisoners, Roma, political dissidents, and marginalized groups who were systematically worked to death, starved, or gassed under his watch. Balanced against the stolen futures of every single survivor who spent the rest of their lives carrying a blue identification number tattooed into the skin of their forearms. By biting down on that tiny glass capsule, Himmler pulled off his final escape. He managed to evade a courtroom that would have forced him to listen to his own meticulous bureaucratic records read back to him, line by line, signature by signature. He avoided looking into the eyes of the people he tried to erase from the earth. Ultimately, the story of Himmler's death offers no clean narrative arc. It provides no sense of catharsis, no feeling of balance, and no true closure. It leaves the world instead with a permanent moral deficit, a historical debt that we can document down to the very last page, but can never actually collect.